If we zoom in even deeper to this process of gradual replacement of pleasures in our spirits, you can see that the biggest issue at play is which overall motivation is going to be in charge. A motivation that opposes the divine design, or a motivation that's aligned with the divine design. We're going to continue to have a mixture of good and bad thoughts and feelings in our outer mind, but whatever motivation ends up in charge in our deeper mind determines how we can sort through all of that to make choices in our lives. At our deeper levels, good and evil cannot coexist within us. So neither can malicious distortion and beneficent truth. We saw in the last lesson that our spirits change gradually. But if we were to look at a time lapse of it, it ends with either one or the other taking over as the driving force. Here's more from that quote.
Evil is the opposite of good, and good is the opposite of evil, and two opposites cannot coexist. Every evil harbors an intrinsic hatred for everything good, and everything good has an infinite love for keeping itself safe from evil and banishing it from itself. It then follows that neither can coexist with the other. If they were together, there would be at first a violent battle and eventually destruction form without tearing it apart and
against itself is laid waste, and every city or home divided against itself will not stand. Anyone who is not with me is against me, and anyone who does not gather with me scatters. And also, famously, no one can serve two masters at the same time, for one or the other will be hated or loved. And there's further crucial commentary on this in the rest of this divine providence quote. So, let's take a deep dive. It's news from heaven. We're going to take a look at this critical process where God makes sure that the evil is out of us before the good can come into us in the deeper parts of our will, and why that's so important to have it happen. This is in Divine Providence, number 233, subsection B, or subsection 3, subnumber B. The Lord can bring into our deeper levels what is good, and the truth that comes from it only to the extent that evil and its distortions have been banished. We're going to jump around a little bit. There's cool stuff in between, but this is going to focus on a thread here. The Lord tells us, maybe you've heard this Bible passage, in the book of Revelation, that he will come in when that door is opened by our efforts. I am standing at the door and knocking. If any hear my voice and open the door, I will come into them and dine with them, and they with me. So we've got this situation where the Lord is here. All the goodness and truth and love and peace of heaven is there and constantly has this effort to join to us, make us happy to eternity. Here we are, but there's this door in between. And curiously, God can't come in until we've opened the door. Which makes me wonder, well, why don't we just open the door, and how do you do it? Do you just grab a knob and turn? And why can't God come in till we've opened that door? The door is opened. Okay, we're getting some instructions here. The door is opened when we banish evil. Oh, so instead of like quarter turn to the right, you open, this is a spiritual door that you open when you banish evil. But how do you banish evil? Okay, banished. You banish evil by abstaining and turning from it as hellish and demonic. And what that means in particular is that we're not doing things that are bad and hurtful because it will make me look bad. That's turning from it because it's bad for your reputation, or because I don't want to get caught for it. That's turning from it for fear. Turning from it because it is hellish and demonic sounds pretty dramatic, but you can boil that down into, because this is not the right thing to do. Because I know this is going to harm, and I don't want to do that. That's how we open the door. It is one and the same thing if you say evil or the devil. By the same token, it's one and the same thing if you say goodness or the Lord. Because within everything good, there is the Lord. God is within everything good. And within everything evil, there is the devil. So the reason this door can't open is the devil is in the way. So everything evil, everything that has the intent to put yourself over other people or cause them harm for your own pleasure, the love of ruling and exploiting other people for your own gain, which is the devil, is sitting in the way in our hearts and minds, keeping God from really being able to come in. So to open the door, we have to learn how to completely disassociate with the devil. All right? Why not? Why can't you just have, God's pretty strong, God could just come in and at least be in here, and then we could talk to both of them at the same time, or he could edge the devil, make the devil uncomfortable, and it could get out. If what is good and its truth were brought in before evil and its distortions were removed, or to a greater extent than they were removed, then we would backslide from the goodness and return to our evil. This is because the evil would be stronger, and whatever is stronger wins, eventually, if not immediately. So yeah, I think God has every desire to just burst in here and alleviate our concerns, take our fears away, comfort us, and we would probably have a great moment. But if we haven't cleared out our attachment to self-centeredness and materialism, after we normalize it, like, oh yeah, that God is more present here, or the good that love that comes from the Lord, I have that in my life, I get these good impulses. If the evil is ultimately stronger, even if it's been overshadowed for a minute, we would actually backslide away and end up in this condition, back where it's the love of self and love of the world that's ruling us. But that would be much worse than where we were when we started. He says, further, and we'll explain why, further, the essential pleasure of our life, no offense, is to love ourselves and the world more than anything else. Meaning the thing that makes me the happiest is my own sense of myself and stuff that's pleasing. This pleasure cannot be taken away instantly, only gradually. And to the extent that any of this pleasure stays with us, evil is stronger. The only way this evil can be taken away is for our love for ourselves to what? Disappear? No. Check this out. To become a love of service. Put another way, or for our love of power for our own sake to become a love of power for the sake of service. This makes service the head, and for the first time it makes love for ourselves or for power the body beneath the head, and eventually the feet we walk on. So everything you associate with ego, say, or this we could say love of self in Swedenborg's terminology, the power and the pride and the joy at being greater than others, and the will to have your own way, and the anger if people don't do what you want or give you what you want, that can be converted into something good. God can make the miracle of bending that stuff into a love of usefulness, alu. And love of usefulness is, sure, it's got the same facets. Maybe I do still care about being good at things, and I do still want the ideas that I think are right heard, but it comes to be because I believe that these things will serve my fellow human beings, that I can do something good for them, and I'm not in it for myself. And if it turns out that I need to not be in charge of this thing or better about this thing, that's okay, because what I'm ultimately excited about is the Lord. So that's the task that's out there. We've got this inherent, everybody inherits this love for ourselves and love for the world above everything, the desire to stand out, be better, be more powerful, put ourselves above other people in whatever way. That's in the way, that's blocking the door, and God has got to remove our love of that by converting it into love of good things that resemble those negative things or are akin to them. That's what God needs to do. But here we want to talk about how God needs to do it and why the process needs to be done in such a particular way. When we are absorbed in evil, much that is true can be introduced into our minds and stored in our memory without being profaned. So profanation is when, if the Lord just burst in with love, like we're talking about before, and we said, oh, that's great, and we got into it a bit, but then went back and were evil and mixed these two together, that causes a mess. And Swedenborg calls that profanation. It's really not good for you. So that's why you can't just go right for your heart. But truths can go into our minds, even when the devil's still got the door closed. Truths can come into the mind and start to do the work of inspiring us to oust the love of self. Let's get a little bit weird. You want to talk about cow stomachs and how they relate to this process? We might compare our memory to the ruminatory stomach that some animals have. What they eat goes there, and as long as it is there, it is not really in their body, but outside it. So, I'm not a bovine physiologist. I don't think that's a career. But basically, you've got, you're going to be a grazing animal. You got your feet. There's green grass grew all around. It's eaten, and it ends up in, there's a series of stomachs. We'll just simplify it into 2 here. And grass ends up in this one. Grass is very hard to digest. It needs to be chewed a lot. So instead of having to chew the whole thing while you're down there in the field and you're vulnerable to predators and things, it's stored up in here. And only when the opportunity arises can we regurgitate it, chew the cud, chew it again, and then it's ready to go in. So it's an extra step in so you can process things more thoroughly. And this stuff, which is not really digestible, is not mingled in with the rest of your digestive system. What they eat goes in there, and as long as it is there in this ruminatory stomach, it is not really in their body, but is outside it. Only as they take it out and ingest it, chewing the cud, does it become part of their life and nourish their body. Now let's compare that. The contents of our memory are not physical foods, of course, but spiritual ones. This means that they are truths, essentially thoughts. So we've got these spiritual food, which is thoughts. To the extent to which we have taken them out by thinking, by ruminating, so to speak, our spiritual mind is nourished. It is our volition's love that wants this, that is in its own way hungry and impels us to draw truths out for our nourishment. If that love is evil, then it has a longing and a kind of hunger for unclean thoughts. On the other hand, if it is good, it has a longing and a kind of hunger for clean thoughts. And if thoughts are unsuitable, it sets them aside, dismisses them, and evicts them by various means. So your mind has got your thoughts and, let's say, your feelings are here. Ideas, good or bad, can be stored up here. And as we'll see in a minute, God can keep these things separate so that you could have positive ideas on one side, negative ideas on the other. Your will, what you love, is hungry. And what it needs to eat, like this here, is thoughts. So whichever we pull out, whichever kind of love this is in us, if God hasn't banished the devil yet, then the devil's in there. If God's in there, then God's in there. And it's pulling out these thoughts. We chew on them, we ruminate them, and then they can nourish us. The Lord in his divine providence, however, takes the greatest care that we do not accept it into our volition before we have, in our apparent autonomy, banished evils from our outer self, or do not accept it to a greater extent than we have banished our outer evils. That is, whatever we take into ourselves willingly becomes part of us. Just like food, once you chew it up and digest it, that's what you're made out of. Part of our life, and in our actual life, the life we derive from our volition, evil and good cannot coexist. That would destroy us. So you can't have evil and good together in here. Just like you can't have indigestible and digestible stuff in there. However, we can have both in our discernment. We can have there what we call malicious distortions and beneficent truths, but not at the same time. Otherwise, we would not be able to see what is evil from the perspective of goodness or to recognize what is good from the perspective of evil. However, they are marked off and separated there, like the inside and outside of a house. This is what we're saying. You can have these two things both living in there. You can't have good and evil at the same time in here. But you can have falsity and truth in here. And something about the organ that is your mind allows them to stay separated enough that you can access one or the other at a time. And that's crucial because you need, if you're ever going to learn what evil is and why it's not good, you have to sometimes be in a state of just goodness, because then you can look at it and see it for what it is. If evil was mixed in with goodness, you wouldn't be able to tell what's good or what's evil, because you'd always be judging from the mixed perspective of both things. If this were done too early or too fully, then our volition would adulterate the goodness, and our discernment would falsify the truth by mingling them with what is evil and what is false. Our love for ourselves, the head of all our evils, is more adept than any other love at adulterating what is good and distorting what is true. It does this by misusing the rationality that the Lord gives to the worst and the best of us alike. It can actually rationalize things so that something evil seems perfectly good and something false seems perfectly true. So the devil is crafty. If we are being ruled, as we all start out, being ruled by love of ourself and love of the world over love of God and love of the neighbor, things that God tries to introduce into here, this thing knows how to rationalize and pervert and get it so that it doesn't end up freeing us and making us better, that it actually ends up making us worse. So this is why God has this secret espionage route here, where truths can be introduced into the mind and actually into a component in the mind that is safely separate from the distortions that the love of self and love of the world draw to them automatically. There's this little secret stash of truth that God can then get us to ruminate on sometimes. And as we start to consider these things and say, hey, maybe that is true, maybe that is right, then through that, we are able to slowly but surely start to push the devil out of the will. And as over the course of our lives, we do that more and more, that is creaking this door open. And to the extent that we can open it and know that we won't be shutting it again, we've really made that progress, that's the extent to which God can come in and start to fill our lives and minds and hearts with the goodness that he wants to fill it with. So it can seem like it's taking a long time to move in our minds and hearts from hell into heaven, to have everything be positive and good. And I'm not going to say that it doesn't take a while, but there's a really good reason for it, and it's being done very deliberately and very carefully. And we can play our part of opening up that door by taking the time to look at the things in our mind that we're chewing on, look at the things in our heart that are driving us, and when something comes up that we can tell, this is blocking the door to God, we can work to grow averse to it, to say, I don't think that's good. Not because I'm being forced to, or somebody told me to, or because I'm worried, but because this is just not what I want to have in me. Push it away, and through that, God can be creaking that door open more and more. We start out attached to lower self thoughts and feelings, and we can't attach to better ones without letting go of those lower self ones. And some will be easy to let go of, and some very hard. And sometimes it will take what we call hitting rock bottom to let go of something that it's really hard to let go of.
So why is it that we sometimes have to hit rock bottom before we're willing to change? I've given a lot of thought to this, having been in recovery for many years and seeing lots of different people's stories. First thought that comes to mind is that alcoholism addiction, it's both a physical and a mental disease. And the physical part is easily resolved with complete and total abstinence from the substance. But the more difficult problem is this mental aspect. And it's been proven over 85 years that the most successful solution for the mental aspect of this disease is a spiritual program. And that can be a tough pill for some people to swallow. And so it requires that you basically change all of your thinking and all of your actions, become an entirely different person. And so some people are very reluctant, right? They know what they know from their years of experience, and this idea that they have to surrender, turn their will and their life over to a higher power is daunting. So they basically stay in the misery for a very long time before they're willing to ask for help. And I have chalked this up to a spectrum of different egos that come with this disease into recovery. And those of us with a very, very strong ego, we often have to hit a very deep bottom before we'd be willing to ask for help. And there are some people that don't have such a strong ego. You know, they're miserable enough that they come and have an open mind. And they're like, okay, I'll give this a try. So we have a saying in the recovery community that there's a gift of desperation. And it is a gift, because the more desperate you are when you get here, the more willing you'll be to do the things that you need to do to achieve what we call, you know, freedom, happy, joyous, and free life. And it's not easy. You have to do certain things every day to keep that disease arrested. Just like if we were to pick up the substance again, the physical aspect of the disease would kick right back up. The same is true for the spiritual aspect. We have to do these daily practices in order to keep the mental aspect of the disease in check so that we can be happy, joyous, and free. There's also this sort of weird relationship we get with the substance. So a lot of us actually start in with alcohol and drug use because we're so uncomfortable to begin with. In my case, I had, a lot of childhood trauma that made me very sad. And along comes this substance that made me feel better. So, of course, I got very attached to that substance. It became my best friend. It helped me through every day. And basically, when it stopped working, it was my worst nightmare because I had all of the same sadness and grief and trauma that I started out with. But now I'm addicted to this substance that's no longer working, right? So in order to detach from that thing that had been my solution forever, I had to have a sufficient substitute. And it can be hard to really trust this higher power that it's going to give you the same relief that this substance used to. But with practice, you can achieve that. You start out by learning to reach out and when you're uncomfortable, talk to someone. And that you see provides immediate relief. And then you think, aha, okay, I can make it through this day. And as life goes on and more serious challenges come about, you've practiced this muscle of, prayer, meditation, reaching out to others, and you know that will work the same way that the substance did. But it takes a lot of pain really to get you convinced to try something like this. It's kind of mind-boggling, you know. Many people come in either with baggage from childhood religion that didn't sit right with them, or like myself, no real exposure to church or you know, having God in your life on a daily basis. And so the idea of, hey, I need help, I'm dying here, and somebody saying, oh, you need to pray. I mean, it's hard to like believe that initially, that that's going to be there for you and work, but it does. And when you get little bits of evidence, then it gets easier and easier to you know, let go of those bad habits and practice these new habits. And that's really what it's about.
This is why there are times that reaching a point of despair is needed before we can let go of something that's blocking our spiritual progress. Unless people being harassed by falsity reach the point of despair, the infestation fails to achieve its ultimate purpose. The idea that spiritual trials intensify to the point of despair is obvious from the Lord's trials in Gethsemane and afterward on the cross, which lasted till he reached a state of despair. But no one being persecuted and tested can be injured by the injection of falsities, since the Lord keeps such a person safe. It doesn't always have to reach that point. God gives us plenty of wake-up calls before the crash. It's like those noises in your car engine. You can pay attention when they're mild and address the problem then, or you can ignore it until the car totally breaks down and it's a much bigger bill at the repair shop. But in the end, either will get us where we need to go. One is more painful than the other, but either way, God is leading you along to break free of dysfunction and move into a better place. To recap, two opposing forces can't exist indefinitely in us. Good is the motivation to act in harmony with the divine design, and evil is the motivation to act against it. One of those is going to end up taking the leadership role in us. If we're willing, God will put goodness first with us, but it has to be done at a deliberate pace and with a particular order to prevent evil from taking over before the good can become established. So this can happen, God stores up truths in our mind to be deployed at the right time. Now that we've taken a look at how God is removing evil in us, let's investigate how God operates when dealing with evil on a global scale.